All right, I want to talk about the prophecies that are being fulfilled and the prophecies that are not necessarily being fulfilled as far as this Israel situation. Uh, Now, as far as the situation is concerned, we see that there's a war in response to certain activities that the Palestinians did to them uh, recently. Now, here's the thing about this war: it's not going to really accomplish much as far as the goals I think that you would think that a war would accomplish. All right. So here's the thing about this from a natural and from a biblical perspective. Like from a natural perspective, if you have a group of people mixed in with them very well, is a significant amount of people um, that want to cause you problems, like annihilate you and destroy you and things of this nature. The best thing to do, whether all the people are bad or most of the people are good, or, I mean, all the people are bad or most of the people are good or a vast majority of the people are good. If once certain things reach a certain threshold, then they could be a problem, whether it's the majority or not. Now, if you have certain these amount of people that want to destroy you, the only thing you can do is separate yourselves from them. So Israel has to either like relocate. I mean, I'm just talking about hypothetically, or they have. I mean, Israel has to move, or the move either peacefully or violently, or Palestinians have to be moved peacefully or violently. Either way, they can't. There is no coexisting with them two coexisting with each other, in it being remain peace, in there being any remain peace. Any peace is going to be temporary. At best, in this situation, there will be a war that'll just be localized, and there will be a minimal. There will be a war that'll be localized, and hopefully casualties to be to a minimum, and then there will be a longer lasting temporary peace. That's at best. And at worst, you can get the world involved with a shorter temporary peace. But it is what it is. Now, as far as prophecies, we're going to go with prophecies that are not being fulfilled first. So the prophecies that people talk about every time something bad happens with Israel, well, when people talk about bad things that happen with Israel, people talk about it being the end times and things of this nature. Now, it talks about in Acts, in the book of Acts, they talk about they basically say after Jesus is the end time. So technically, they're right as far as it being the end times. But as far as it being Daniel's 70th week or the Great Tribulation, for those who don't know, Daniel's 70th week is the last 7 years before, effectively the last 7 years before Jesus comes back, and Daniel or the Messiah comes, and the Jesus, and if you're a Jew, you would just say the Messiah comes, or and the Great Tribulation is the last 3.5 years of that, effectively the last 3.5 years of that week. And when you see the this 3.5 year time period talks about it in Daniel 7, I believe Daniel 7, Daniel 12, and then in Revelations 13, when it talks about the beast or the Antichrist ruling the system, it always talks about him going to war with the saints. Whenever it talks about that 3.5 year period and the Antichrist, it always, when it talks about in association with that time period being 3.5 years in the Antichrist, it always talks about him warring with the saints every single time. All three of those times where it talks about the 42 months, 1260 days, or whatever times or half time, or whatever the language they use, it always talks about him warring with the saints. Now, anyways, this is not that time period because there's several prophecies that that have to be fulfilled before the Daniel 70, before the Great Tribulation. All right, Daniel 70 week, there has to be a covenant that's concerned, agreement that is that involves many nations that has to be signed or confirmed. And I don't know how it's going to be confirmed or what that agreement is, but you're not in any threat of the Great Tribulation if you don't see a 10 ruler empire. That's one, because it talks about this in Daniel 7, Daniel 2, and Daniel 2 with the 10 toes of the statue, Daniel 7 with the 10 horns of that last beast, and the 11th horn being the Antichrist, and then 10 horns represent 10 kings. And you see this within Revelations, I believe 17 or 18, where it talks about the beast, the red beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns, and the 10 horns were 10 kings that gave the power of the last beast to rule for 1 hour. But if you don't see a 10 king empire, and you don't see 10 king empire, you don't see sacrifices, sorry, you're not in the danger of, there's not about to be a great tribulation. There's not. Now, as far as the pre-trib rapture is concerned, if you believe in that, I don't. There could be hard times whether there's a great tribulation or not. Like the pre-trib, nothing about the pre-trib rapture doctrine prevents Christians from going through hard times or anything like that. And most pre-tribbers that have that have a more that are more well read will acknowledge that there's nothing about the pre-trib rapture that exempts you from persecution or anything like this. So whether you believe in a preacher, like we're about to go into the tribulation or not, that doesn't mean that life can't be extremely hard on you where you're at, or even in your personal situation. Like we see the great tribulation happening just in people in general in communist countries. Like we see this in North Korea. We see this in North Korea, and we've seen this in other communist countries in the past. We know in the 20th century, like 262 million people, 262 million people died from their own governments killing them. That wasn't a great tribulation. We saw Adolf Hitler do what he did to the Jews, and that wasn't a great tribulation. We just saw a lot of atrocities happen, and there not be a great tribulation. And we see even now there's great persecution in certain countries, mostly in like Africa and Middle East areas. And it's not the great tribulation. So it doesn't exempt you from the pre-trib rapture, doesn't exempt you from, or just because it's not the tribulation doesn't exempt you from going through hard times. Now, I'm not here to discuss whether the rapture is pre or post trib. This message is independent of that. But the prophecy is not being fulfilled. It's not about to be the great tribulation. Not about yet. There's a few years out. How many years? I don't know. There's also has to be a war with Egypt, or like, because there's the king. Like and we don't see this. There's a war with Egypt with the king, because it talks about the king of the north and king of the south in Daniel 11. It talks about a series of the king of the north and the king of the south all throughout Daniel 11. But it starts from verse 21. It starts talking about who you know as the Antichrist, and it goes on from there. And he goes to war with the king of the south, which is most likely Egypt, because it's the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, and they're going back and forth. And the king of the north comes from the Seleucid Empire area, and that's Syria, Turkey, that area, and the Ptolemaic Empire is Egypt. So there's a northern kingdom that's going to war with Egypt before you have the abomination of desolation. The abomination of desolation is when they stop sacrifices. It talks about the abomination of desolation in several different places. I know one is Daniel 9, 26, 27, Daniel 11, I believe, verses 30 to 31, I believe, and Matthew 24, verse 16. But anyways, so there's basically three signs: 10 king empire, and then there's another ruler, 11th ruler that comes out of that empire, and that would be the Antichrist. Then you have in the King Empire, I believe it consists mostly of the Middle East. Interesting enough, a friend of mine was telling me there's like 10 nations that have in their charter to annihilate Egypt. Annihilate Israel. I don't really know. I have to do more research on that. But that's that. So you have the king of the north is north of Egypt, north of Israel. So that'll be Syria, Turkey. That will include Syria, Turkey, the Syria, Turkey area, but not exclusively the Syria, Turkey area. It could also include Russia. If we had a world war that involved, it would involve probably the United States in the West, or probably NATO versus Russia and the Middle East, and that could be and that could set the stage for there be a confirmation of the covenant where it would allow Israel to do sacrifices. Because if Israel is in no position to do sacrifices, I'm not worried about whether there's going to be an Antichrist, because the Antichrist has to stop sacrifices. But so those are the things that are not being fulfilled. So let's talk about the things that are being fulfilled. So, and how you would know if those things are about to be fulfilled. There will be probably a war with a nation around the Syria area, and a nation around Egypt. I believe Egypt is the nation that it will be at war with. You'll have a 10 king empire, and then you'll have sacrifices. You'll definitely have sacrifices. Whether it's in a temple or a tent, it'll definitely be sacrifices. I believe it's going to be in a temple, but regardless, we know it's going to be sacrifices in order for sacrifices to cease, which we already talked about. Now, also, the gospel has to be preached around the whole world, and then shall the end come. And I don't believe that has happened yet either. Now, prophecies that are being fulfilled is in order for, like, if you're going to do what God says, you have to do it the way God said it. Otherwise, you're not going to receive the blessings that are intended for that act of obedience. We'll put it like this way. We put it that way. Now, regardless of why you believe or how you believe Israel is in this nation, entered into that nation, in order for Israel to receive God's protection, which it seems to promise in certain, it has to, it has to follow God, number one, and number two, it has to drive all the inhabitants of the land out. And it talks about that in Numbers 33. Numbers 33. If it doesn't drive all the inhabitants out, it talks about these inhabitants who shall be thorn in their sides and pricks in their thorn in their eyes and pricks in their sides, or something like that, and they shall give them problems. And in the book of Judges is talking about that. So let's read Numbers 33. And I give this credit to Irvin Baxter Jr., the late Irvin Baxter Jr., because he used to always read this when it came to when Yasser Arafat was doing terrorist attacks. He used to always read this, and it's confirmed. It's just confirmed. It's always going to be this way until the time Jesus comes, or to the time, or if you're a Jew, until the time the Messiah comes, but until the times Jesus comes. But anyways, the Lord spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab and Jordan near Jericho, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying unto them, When you are passed over Jordan into the land of Canaan, they shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you. You shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you, and destroy their pictures, and destroy their molten images, and pluck down their high places, and dispossess the inhabitants of the land that dwell therein. And for if I've given you the land, that I've given you the land to possess it, and if you have, and you shall divide the land by the inheritance among your families, and do more, that you shall give more inheritance, and a few shall give fewer inheritance, and ye shall be in a place where his lot is falleth, is according to the tribes of the fathers that ye shall inherit. But if you shall not, verse 55, this is important, but if you shall not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come to pass that those which are remain in the of them shall be pricks in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they shall vex you in the land which you dwell. And this is what you see. And I'm not saying Israel has been an angel or anything like that. I'm not. And this is whether you believe that or not. This is implied. This is just that if you do not drive the inhabitants, not whether you, no matter how you act, those inhabitants are going to give you problems. Them trading land for peace has never worked. All right, and the Bible kind of shows this. And they're thinking like, oh, you can't. It's just not going to work. It's just not. And you see also in Deuteronomy where it talks about in Deuteronomy 7 and 28, 7 and 8. It says, the Lord shall cause your enemies that rise up against thee. When it talks about the blessings of obeying him, it says, the Lord shall cause thy enemies to rise up against thee, to be smitten before thy face, and they shall come out against thee one way, and they shall flee before thee 7 ways, and ye shall command a blessing in your storehouses, and all thou settest in thou hand unto it, and thou shalt be blessed in the land the Lord has given. Anyways, I just paraphrase that last little part. But anyways, we shall see if they're obedient, then he shall make their nations like they shall rise up against them, and then they won't have a problem with them. But that's not necessarily happening now. And Matthew 24, let me read this last one. Matthew 24 verses 1 through 14 or 1 through 16. Verse 16 talks about the abomination of desolation, but I'll just read verses 1 through 14, because this is like what we're out now in is in the beginning of the sorrows, but the end does not yet come. The end the end when Jesus was talking about was the great, when you see the abomination of desolation, all right, which it talks about in verse 15. But Jesus, all right, so we'll start from verse 4. It says, Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you, that many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And we've seen that happen. And they shall swear wars, and they shall hear wars and rumors of wars, and ye be not troubled. All these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. This is verse 6. The end is not yet. Even though there's wars, every time you see a big war, be like, oh, this is the end. No, there should be wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not yet. All right. And they shall rise a nation, king against king, and famines and pestilence and earthquakes. The end is not yet. All right. Famines, pestilence, and earthquakes. And these are the beginnings of sorrows. And this is what we're in, the beginnings of sorrows. There shall be deliver you to be afflicted, and they shall kill you. We see that, and they shall, you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And we see that. And they shall, and many shall be offended and betray one another and hate one another, and many false prophets and shall rise and shall deceive many. We've seen that already. And because of the iniquity of our love, many shall wax cold. We've seen this now. And you shall endure to the end, shall be saved. And the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to all the world for a witness in the nations, and then the end shall come. So verse 14 talks about this is when the end shall come. And when therefore you shall see the abomination of desolation, verse 15, spoke about the prophet Daniel, and stand in a holy place, then you wish you do Judea flee, and in the mountains, and in Judea flee into the mountains, and so forth. And I believe Judea is where the West Bank is. Now, this is just basically what's going on. Israel is not really in obedience with God. They're not really following God like that. It's more of a secular state. And number two, they're having to drive the inhabitants of the land out, like the Lord said. This doesn't involve genocide. You can just be relocated without genocide. But this is, this is why you can't. This is why the land is not going to be. There's not going to be peace for any long length of time. But anyways, this is in prophecy. These are the prophecies being fulfilled. But anyways, that's all I really have to say. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Peace.